start to talk about interactive storytelling. Sound like a good idea?
Sounds great.
Okay, the first topic for today is the Sappho programming language, right? That was our first lesson, wasn't it? And I'm very proud of Sappho, but everybody who writes programs has their own ideas about what a good programming language would look like. Let me just ask, have any of you ever tried to design your own programming language?
Thankfully, no.
Well, not yet. Almost everybody gets around to doing something like that.
You could argue that composers maybe do this on another, but it's not really programming. It's more,
yeah.
It's a different notational system.
Well, in fact, the reason we have different programming languages is that we have different programming needs. First, let me just point out the basic hierarchy. Some of you probably already know this, but here we go. At the lowest level, we have machine code. That's the binary digits that make up the commands that are executed by the central processing unit. That's the lowest level of programming. Nobody does that. At a next higher level is assembly language code, which is sort of a readable version of machine language code. It just translates little contractions into hexadecimal words, and then those go into the computer. And very few people do assembly language coding nowadays, except some operating systems people, which is kind of a shame, because I started off not just with assembly language, but with machine language. That is, my first programs were written in hexadecimal, and I had to memorize the 6502 opcode set. Anyway, above that, we get into what most people think of as programming languages, various compiled languages. The lowest level of this is probably C, which was designed as sort of a super assembly language. And then we move up from there. There were a whole bunch of these procedural languages, Pascal, Forth, Basic, Fortran, COBOL, and so forth. Then at the next level up, we get the object-oriented languages, C++, Java, so forth. And then from there, we spread out into application-specific languages, which are usually thought of as scripting languages. And these actually sort of compile down, step by step, down into machine code. But the thing about these that's important to understand is that they are specific to a particular problem. For example, Excel, Microsoft Excel, has a scripting language you can use. I mean, there are scripting languages for all sorts of things now. They are customized to a particular need. And that's what Sappho is. It is a scripting language that is customized to the needs of interactive storytelling. And it has a lot of very interesting features to it. I'm not trying to teach you to use Sappho, because that commits you to using my own technology. And while you're free to use my technology, I want you to think in broader terms about how you might create a technology of your own. And so I want you to understand some of the useful ideas in Sappho that you might be able to steal for your own purposes. I'll go over some of them. First thing is the use of color. You know, computers made the transition to color in the early 90s. Certainly by 95, there were very few people using just straight black and white displays. We were still stuck with, well, no, we were up to 16-bit color by 95, by the mid 90s. And by the year 2000, everybody had 24 or 32-bit color. That was universal. And yet, people didn't start using color in programming languages until about 10 years later. And I picked up on the use of it as a very useful feature much earlier because, well, it really helps. You can, I suppose part of this is the, I was brought up with very tiny computers with very little memory, very little display capability, very little of anything. And so I'm still stuck with this extreme parsimoniousness. Let me explain that word. I try to use every resource to the ultimate. I don't throw away a pen until it's totally empty. You know, everything I do, I just hate throwing things away, and I try to come up with a use for them. And that all comes from my early computer years when you really had to squeeze for every capability you had. And so when I got when I got color on my computer.
Don't worry about it for an hour then.
When I got color on the computer, by God, I was going to use it. And I decided to use it for data typing purposes. The nice thing about Sappho is it is not a freely extensible data type system. It has a fixed set of data types. And so I was able to assign a color to each data type.
Can you close the door, please? Oh,
So,
sorry.
I was going to go back and open and close that door there. So anyway, so color is something to use. Don't waste that resource. It's a valuable resource. Let's see. Well, first, let me just, if any of you have any questions, just go ahead and type them in. Oh, and here they are. Made to design interact. It seems nice, but it is not free. A lot of interactive storytelling designers use it to prototype their game. Maybe it would be inspiring to you, Chris. I will have a very quick look at that. Oh, and here it comes. No, we don't want to see you. Here we go. Create and test your game scenarios without coding, ultimate collaborative writing tool, a tree, come on guys. This looks like a prototyping system. Test route tracing. Okay, well, this looks to me like a writer's tool. Let me quickly look at his examples. And, oh, sorry, it won't let me look at the examples.
Yeah, that's a bad design decision. You have to make an account just to look at the free stuff. So it's I told the guy it's a bad way to, you know, if you have to make an account to see the thing, it's like a closed door.
Yep.
It's like you don't want to make an account just to check out a free thing. Like,
yep. Yep.
So yeah, but the idea is it's to make it's like Twine, the software that uses you know, but a bit more complex. Like you can make some code like booleans and if conditions and you know, basic logic, like you know, basic code. And studios use it to make the scenario of the game, the interactive scenario, and to use it as a team. So it's better than Twine, but it's you have to pay. So it's only for, I guess, people who want to pay for software, I guess. Professional.
Is its computational capability restricted to Boolean calculations? Can it do numeric?
No. Yeah, you can do like I have to I made an account, so I could show it to you if I share my screen, but it's basic stuff. But it's you have a lot of options to do, like pseudo code. I can show you if you want, but maybe it would take a bit of time, and you don't have time to to see this kind of stuff. But you can use you can put some conditions, and not only it's like node. It's node based, so you don't have to code. You only have to just a drag and drop. It's like a drag and drop system, like a bit like your software that doesn't need code. You click, and it's a bit relevant to the inverse parser, where you have only options that you can use. The software will not show you stuff that will not work. It's only working.
That's
thing.
good. That's
and
good.
The inverse parser thing, to put away this celestory software. The inverse parser, it's used in Visual Studio. Microsoft software to make code. They have something called IntelliSense that tells you, if you begin to write a variable, it will tell you which, if you use a function and you call a class from another script, it will say like my script dot, and you put dot, and it will propose to you every function you can use.
Yeah.
It seems like an inverse parser. Maybe I didn't understood.
Well, yeah, that is, and in fact, a number of development environments, Eclipse has a feature rather like that. That's not quite an inverse parser, but it's close in many ways. The distinction here is that an inverse parser applies that inversion to the complete communication. That is, everything you do has to go through the inverse parser, whereas what they're doing is more of a suggestion, a single suggestion. Oh, you're right here. For this, you might be able to stick in that, but for other things, well, you put it in differently. The inverse parser is designed to create entire sentences. So it's like a more organized, or a higher level set of suggestions. So yes, and I do want to talk about inverse parsers. I do want to emphasize the importance of inverse parsers. Certainly, there is absolutely no justification for a parser anymore. That is, any program that uses a parser is just wrong, just stupid. There's absolutely no justification for doing that these days. In fact, there really never was. Well, no, there are situations, but even those aren't very practical. The inverse parser breaks down when you have a huge number of options at a certain point. That is, it works best when there are only a few options at each point in the interaction. If you're going to have gobs and gobs of options, then you need something else. But because inverse parser typically relies on some kind of menu structure. However, even then, there are ways to handle large numbers of options. For example, here you are in here you go, in Google search, and you want to search by an image that you have on your computer. And you click on the thing that says, yes, I want that option. And it puts up the standard file selection dialog box that allows you to navigate through the directory structure of your computer to find that one file that you want to use. Well, that's an inverse parser. The wrong way to do that would be to say, okay, please type in the directory structure leading to the file you want. Type in my hard drive / C:/ the photograph directory / blah, blah, blah. That is always the wrong way to do it. So definitely use inverse parsers. That's a certainty. Another point about Sappho is, and in fact the whole system, is that it goes to great lengths to prevent many of the standard programming problems. Syntax errors used to be a huge problem. They are much less of a problem nowadays, that since we have syntax sniffers built into many programming languages. That is, if you mistype something, it will often come back and say, mismatched parentheses. Even then, though, it can be very difficult. Well, where was that parenthesis, and counting and so forth. But with Sappho, it is impossible to make a syntax error. It's not that it sniffs it out and says, you screwed up. It just doesn't let you do it in the first place. So there are an awful lot of guardrails built into Sappho that really make it difficult to make a mistake. Even in the case, in fact, Sappho has one scheme that is not generally usable, but is really beautiful for my technology, and that's the poison way of dealing with runtime errors. Classic thing. I mean, how does a programming language know that you've entered a command or a line of code that under certain circumstances might produce a runtime error, like an index out of range or divide by 0? It can't. All it can do is, while you're running it, it'll stop the program and say, index out of range. Sorry, your program failed. You got to start over. The Sappho system doesn't do that. It has a much smarter system. You see, all of the calculations done in Sappho are basically calculations about decisions that characters have to make. And if a runtime error occurs in any of these decisions, the engine does not say, you screwed up, I'm killing this, the whole thing dies. Instead, it simply poisons that particular decision. It says, no, sorry, that decision is invalid. We will not consider that option, but we'll continue considering the other options. And everything just keeps on going. In fact, you can use this deliberately as a design feature. I think I used an example there of a lady deciding she wants to get married. She wakes up one morning and says, I think I'll get married today. And she has a system for selecting the ideal person. Well, if it turns out that there simply is no male available for her to marry, they're all dead or married or something, it simply says, no, you can't get married, you'll have to do something else. And so she does something else. And in fact, you can write your code in that manner to actually, it's a way of avoid, you don't have to write all these if statements to say, well, if nobody's available, then don't do it. It's automatic. Let's see, from Mark. Did you user test Sappho at all to tweak the UI? Just curious how you design the iconography. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's the icons were developed by two graphic designers, graphic artists. Let's see, from John to everyone, similar to a text-based adventure for no options. John, could you expand on that? Joho, I can't read. What do you mean by that question, Joho?
As in reference to when you were talking about like null errors for when the option, an option isn't available in text-based adventures, it'll give you, some kind of message rather than crashing the game. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. In the case of in the case of my technology, typically a character has multiple options. And so if one of the options is poison, they're just going to end up selecting another one. In the most extreme case, yes, the character simply does nothing. A real question, is Sappho dependent on authored events, or can events be generated? Oh yes, events. In fact, the whole system is designed to be absolutely symmetric. That is, the player character is no different from any of the other characters as far as the engine is concerned. In fact, the system can run, you could have you could modify the design slightly so that the player can decide, I'm gonna go eat dinner, you guys just keep on going. And somebody else, in effect, the artificial intelligence steps in and will take over for the human player, and the whole thing just keeps going for a while. And then the human player can come in and say, I think I'll play as that character now, and whoosh, jump into that character, and everything just keeps on going the same. The system is completely symmetric with that, with respect to that. So now, of course, that means that the creator of the story world has to come up with all the algorithms by which characters make their decisions, which is a lot of work, but it's essential if you're going to have characters interacting with the human player anyway. So yeah, the system runs quite independently. It doesn't need AI, it needs algorithms. For example, what would cause a character to lose his temper? Well, that depends on his personality. And you've got these personality traits, and you can talk about the magnitude of the provocation using the verb import quality, and test that against the character's intrinsic, how hot-tempered that character is, and you do a calculation. And if you come up with a number that's bigger than some threshold, you say, yep, he lost his temper, now he's going to start yelling and screaming. Let's see, I specifically mean scenarios. Can the characters generate its own scenarios? I think the name for it is event. Yes, that is intrinsic to what characters do. The basic system is a reactive event system. That is, you start off with an event taking place. An event, the data structure for an event is really just a sentence. And a sentence consists of a subject, a verb, and any number of objects following it. The great majority of events are just 3 words: subject, verb, direct object. So Joe punches Fred. Mary calls Tom. You might have a 4th object. Jane gives Tony the bicycle. Those are all events. And inside the machine, they're just sentences. And then you have a processing system that figures out what that sentence actually means. No, I don't want to say it that way. When an event takes place, other characters react to it. And they react to it in several ways, the most important of which is they might trigger their own events. In other words, Joe punches Fred. Now it's Fred's turn. What's Fred going to do about it? Well, Fred pulls out his whiskey bottle and breaks it over Joe's head. And okay, that's an event. What is Joe going to do about it? And back and forth and back and forth. So that's the basic structure of the system. Events, which are sentences, which are analyzed by an engine, which generate reactions, which become events. So that's I'll be talking about the engine in a future, in one of the lessons. We'll get into the details of how that works. Let's see. Yeah, another element of the whole editor that I'm very proud of is the elimination of undefined elements. This is so frustrating. Here you are writing up your code and you throw in something, and a little later it comes back and says, wait a minute, you didn't declare that array yet. You got to declare it before you can use it. And that never happens in my system, because every time you create something, it automatically fills in elements. It has sort of a default set of elements that it fills in for you. In the worst case, it will fill in null, or it will fill in undefined elements, but it will prominently display those to you. And in fact, you can look up at any time. There's a table somewhere you can say, show me anything I haven't defined yet, and it'll just automatically show them to you. But most of the time, you just don't have to sweat remembering that I'm down here and I got to stick something way up there that declares the variable or the array or whatever, or initializes it, something like that. That's a really useful feature. We put up with programmers put up with a lot of shit. You know, we shouldn't have to. Let's see. Yes. Another thing I did that would possibly not be useful in, or certainly is not useful in most programming languages, but I think in a very high level scripting language like this is entirely appropriate. And that's that there aren't any loops. All the loops are intrinsic to the system. That is, an awful lot of stuff happens internally, but at no point do you ever program a loop. You don't, there's nothing where you say, all right, set this loop up, here's the contents of the loop, now do it this many times or until that happens or whatever. It turns out there are only two really common loops. Well, actually, no, there's only one really common loop. And that's when you're looking for something or somebody that fits a bill. In other words, let's take the earlier case of the girl wakes up one morning and decides, I'm going to get married today. Who do I want to marry? Well, that's a loop. She wants to go through every male character and decide, do I want to marry this guy? And that breaks down into two components. There are two components to the decision. And this is something that's fundamental to my whole technology. And I think it's a great idea, and I urge you to steal it. It's concept of acceptable and desirable. Acceptable is a Boolean number, and desirable is an arithmetic number. Acceptability is just whether this person fits the bill. For example, when we go through the loop, the first thing it tests is the acceptability, which is defined in the script. So you say acceptable equals, and then you have a Boolean expression. So acceptable might be, he can't be already married. It might be, well, I want to marry a male, so it can't be female. Another one would be age has to be more than he can't be more than 5 years younger than me and can't be more than 5 years older than me. Those are all acceptability requirements. So first it evaluates that Boolean expression, and if it comes out true, if it comes out false, it skips to the next person in the loop. If it comes out true, then it says, all right, how acceptable is he? And that's an arithmetic expression, a number. And so he says the calculation evaluates what makes this person desirable. How handsome is he? How rich is he? How nice is he? How educated is he? Does he have a good job? Is he good in bed? You know, you could have any of these, and you put together an arithmetic expression that yields a number, and then you store that number for that character. And you say, all right, this character, when you're done, you end up with a list of characters. All of the characters in the list are acceptable, but each one has a different desirable result. And you just pick the one with the highest desirability. Bingo, you selected the guy you want to marry. You can do this for selecting props or stages. You know, gee, this place is boring. I'm getting tired of being here. I need to go somewhere else. Where should I go? And same thing with pick. In fact, that we have a function built into it called pick best. And you can pick best actor, pick best stage, pick best prop. You know, there's pick best for every possible attribute or object. And that enables you to deal with all those issues. So no loops, which means no programming screw-ups with a loop, you know, infinite loop or a loop pre-terminating or any of those terrible problems. And then I will also mention something. I'm also very proud of the scriptalizer in Sappho. That is a really neat feature. You can, because when you're dealing with these algorithms, you have all these calculations going on. You need to have a feel for how they're going to work, what they're going to turn out as results. And, you know, if you've worked with equations for decades, as I have, you can get a pretty good idea just looking at it and saying, yeah, that looks right. But you probably don't have that kind of experience. And so how are you going to know if you write an algorithm, whether it's a good algorithm, whether it works well in a lot of different situations? That's what the scriptalizer is for. It's a really neat little feature that allows you to look at any algorithm and play around with the input values and see how they affect the final result. And in fact, you can see it in a way that really makes clear where the algorithm is screwing up, if it is. In other words, you know, you might have an algorithm where you think it looks really great, but if you wiggle around one of the input variables, you find that the output suddenly pins over at the limit. And you say, whoa, this is, you know, it always returns a 0.999, even if this wiggles just a little bit to the left. Well, that's no good. So you've got to change the algorithm so that the output, you know, varies smoothly. And the scriptalizer is the only way that I have ever seen any programming language do anything like that. So one thing that makes it possible is the fact that I'm using bounded numbers. If you're using unbounded numbers, you can't show a number line because it goes out to infinity. So anyway, long question here. You have two groups. You talk about the same subject to the group. We record, so 2 videos of the class, and that may be repetitive for you. Maybe you feel otherwise because this way everyone has time to ask questions about the subject. What if you gave one class about the 2 texts, just like today, And the other class could be used to make a practical project, like we decide on the subject of a game jam. You select the theme. You review our small games made in a duration we decide together. And this way we split the time of your class between theory and practice. Another way of doing it would be to do 30 minutes of theory, 30 minutes of practice, but it seems short. The two groups would have to agree, but I think it would be a nice way to augment the class in a practical utilitarian class. We think better by doing than talking about doing it. Yes. Best way to learn to walk. Yeah. I agree entirely. The way I envisaged this course was not for me to spend all this time lecturing. I had envisioned it as much more Q&A and challenge and talking and so forth. The Sunday group is pretty talkative. You guys are pretty quiet. Perhaps I have not communicated to you how much I would prefer you to be talking back, questions, arguments, and so forth. But let's talk about that. Why are you guys so quiet? Anybody want to,
So for me, it's just so much information. It's like, okay, cool. So much of it is like a new way of thinking. So much of it is like, oh, okay, I gotta like listen to this, figure it out, and track it, and then go think about it before I've got like, lots of questions attached to it. I'm just like, holding on for dear life. It's not that like I'm not interested. It's just like, okay, just hang on, like for dear life.
Okay. Mark, what do you think about that?
I don't know. I'm one of the more talkative ones as I'm engaging in the material in my own way. I'm making my own prototype and doing my own independent research alongside with the class that I've mostly been keeping to myself, that I'm going to share once it's at a point that I feel like I have something working. But for a class of the whole, I mean, there's something that could work for me personally, but we each have our own sort of personal way that we're using this information. So it's hard to know what works for everyone, right?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, is your concern that, gee, if I ask this question, nobody else will benefit from the answer? Is that your fear?
Oh, well, I guess, Lorenzo, you had an idea of maybe another way of integrating more like coursework or like ways of applying the material, I guess, is what I'm gathering from.
Yeah, what I want, right now, what we are trying to do with George, who's not present, I think, today, is we're trying to apply the ideas we see in the class, we talk about, to a game we are trying to make. So we already made some prototypes that are not working because we went to one direction and then another one. But for now, we are doing a prototype, and it's quite interesting. And we are kind of we created this idea, and I think we learn a lot. Like for example, I used Unity a bit. I'm not at all an expert. I think Mark has a lot more experience than me, but I know some stuff, and George doesn't know a lot of Unity. He used another game engine. So what we do is we have one project and we do a collaboration. So it's like GitHub or collaborative coding. So we can code on the same project, but we are on opposites. Like I'm in France, he's in America, and we talk via Skype or phone or something. And it's a great way to on our free time, besides of the theory of the class, we are already doing this. But I think It's I mean, I wanted to share it with you because it's the ideas you have had a practical action on our, like we are making practical prototypes of your ideas. And maybe it would be nice if you, like if we spend time to show you what we've done. But if we do this, for example, it would be like only the game of the two of us on maybe 20 people who are working on different games. So maybe the fact that we do like some game jam, this way everybody has a chance to participate. Not everyone is obligated, and it doesn't take too much time on the class because we should talk about ideas because that's the main thing. You are a game designer and you think a lot about games. So maybe it should be, I don't know, 10 minutes at the end of the class. By the way, what do you think about the game jam? We could do it in 2 weeks. What do you think about this team? You know, quick ideas. And but what I think is sometimes I watch the video of the other group that you publish on YouTube, and I listen to it. You know, I'm walking in the street and I listen to kind of a podcast of you talking and people answering questions. And it seems that it's a bit the same than what we are doing right now. We talk about ideas, about Sappho. Well, 2 days ago, you talked about Sappho to other guys, and very interesting. But I think maybe we have kind of the same questions. It's like, you know, like a bit like school. So maybe if we try and you try some games we make with your ideas, maybe it will be like a communication with more, I don't know, something different, more practical, more, I don't know. I don't know what you guys think. I mean, I don't know.
I have some thoughts, unless Chris.
Yeah,
you
by
wanna
all
say-
means, I'm taking
Oh.
notes here.
Oh yeah. The thing that makes this so difficult is that we each have our own skills, right? Like I have my know-how in Unity to whip something up after thinking a bunch, and you have your own ways of making your own comfortable in an engine, Lorenzo, as does George, as does anyone else here in their own ways. And the thing is that the topics of this class is discussing very challenging higher level concepts.
Yeah.
It would be different if we were like a lower level class, and it'd be different if it was like an intro to Unity class. Then the answer would be, like then it's like, oh, like make something in Unity, right? But we're having to connect these higher level concepts.
Well, that's the purpose here.
That's the purpose.
I'm trying to push you guys in ways you've never been pushed before.
Right. So it becomes a challenge then of how, because we have all of these various skills, how to put it into the concrete and actually apply them.
Okay.
There's a big gap there.
Yeah.
Of how to actually make that happen.
Okay.
Perhaps we
Neil?
could, yeah.
Did someone else have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm to do maybe a sort of middle ground. We could try something where it's more like a design challenge, I guess, where instead of physically building prototypes, we're more working at a conceptual level. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Like,
I see what you guys are, saying very similar things here. That is that it's all theory, and it's hard to see how this theory actually boils down to practice. But let me make sure I get other, Joho, what are your thoughts on all of this?
Obviously, since I joined a week late into the, regarding the quietness, I didn't know what the format was in terms of talking, and everyone seemed to be communicating through the chat. So I assumed that was the format. Regarding the actual content, I having done kind of teaching, usually like doing practicals as like a way to cement knowledge is I prefer that. But you know, in terms of the content so far, it's been fantastic. It's just, as I said, I think it'd be useful to actually make mistakes, try and like, you know, botch these things, you know, as you've said yourself, like, you know, going through the process of actually you know, producing these you know, producing these prototypes, I think would be a good starting point. Yeah.
And Cornell, can I hear your thoughts on this?
Yes, I have like a three-part answer to your question.
Good.
One part is what Colin has mentioned. This is very high-level stuff. On one hand, it's good for us because we can stretch in different directions. But on the other hand, it's something that we didn't encounter before. The second part that's connected to this, you've been doing this for 30 years, 40 years, and like you, by your own words, you still haven't created something that that you are happy with. And
Yep.
now we are just starting out, and like I'm not sure how we can like contribute or even start implementing this in our spare time.
Yep.
And the third thing is what you are proposing is like a very concrete vision for what games can be, what interactive storytelling can be. I'm not saying it in a bad way, because perhaps your interpretation of all of this is something that is the future of the games. But still, this is like a very concrete thing, and I'm like not sure how we can like participate in this, perhaps not on a equal level, but even just like starting out.
Okay. Let me ask, I see three ways that we could do practical exercise. In fact, I have a specific practical exercise in mind. The three ways to do this are, one, I present a particular problem, and then in effect on the chalkboard I say, well, here's how we solve it. And I walk through and I say, we do this, that, and that's the solution. I don't think I think that's the least effective method. I think it's going to be much more effective if you guys are doing it. Second way to do it would be to do it as a group exercise here. That is, I say, all right, guys, here's the problem. How are you going to solve it? And somebody says, well, what if we did this? And somebody else says, no, that won't work because of that. And you go round and round and round, and I'm sort of taking notes or something. And then eventually you arrive at a solution. The danger of that is it could take a long time. The third possibility is to have homework. I present you with the challenge, and then the next week you maybe you send your thing to me by email, and then each of you in the next class presents your solution to the problem. That's probably the most effective, but it has its own weaknesses. What do you guys think of those three approaches? Is there any that you prefer?
Personally, I understand that the second option might take a lot of time, but I like the process of bouncing off ideas. I think that could be interesting, perhaps worth a shot. And if it does turn out to take too much time, then maybe the third option might just make more sense logistically.
Okay.
The second option makes a lot of sense. However, I do worry a bit that because of the uniqueness of the situation here, where, to speak more frankly, a lot of us have very different ideas about game design than you do, Chris.
Oh, yeah.
And we come from very different, we're dealing at it from very different perspectives. So if we were to go around in the more unsupervised roundabout searching for an answer way, that would take a while, I think. Rather than if we discuss the stuff more directly from your perspective, which I think is in the end a little bit, at least from where I'm coming from, a little bit more helpful. As our own assumptions that we have on our end about game design are challenged more directly. It could be that we could dig these up more easily if by discussing them, but I don't know. I do fear that that might hinder us if we do take the second route of having it be more of an unsupervised thing.
Okay.
But I do agree that more interaction between us and you would be a net positive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Other comments, preferences?
Why not have it all? What I mean, what I mean by that is we could start with more like a supervised lecture type of segment where you perhaps talk about some concept. Then we can have like a 20 or 30 minutes to discuss some possible directions, maybe not solutions, but directions. And then as a group project, group homework, perhaps in smaller groups or as a like a whole group, we would be tasked with coming up with tasked to come up with a concrete, like a solution to a very small problem, so that everyone can contribute a few hours every week and try to create like a group project.
Okay. I'm getting a lot of ideas here from this discussion, and I'm bouncing around in my head. Other thoughts, preferences? Whoops.
Pretty wild feedback.
Bad feedback, Lorenzo. I think it's coming from you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you got real bad feedback there.
I was going to say in the meantime, whilst Lorenzo sorts out his mic, so the two things. I don't know if this was like a scheduled thing, but I think it's a good addition having like a kind of feedback session, during the course, just so you can kind of gather notes on like how people think it's going, and like this has been appreciated. And then obviously with the kind of deliverable or whatever is produced from this, I think it'd be useful to have some like very like obviously there needs to be some creative elements to it, but similar to what you've discussed in previous lessons, like having like very, very like finite, like limited options, like an interaction in a phone booth with two people, or just like very, give us almost like a specific scenario and then like design an interaction in that space rather than letting off the leash.
Yes. Leandro, do you think you've got your feedback fixed?
Yeah. So what I want to say is,
You're quiet as a mouse now.
Oop. Okay, go ahead. Oh, you're too low now. Is there?
You have no audio.
do you hear me?
Yes.
Just barely.
Okay, so.
Oh, there you are.
There you
There you
go.
go.
Yeah, better.
Yeah.
Okay, so sorry for the microphone. Yeah, I mean, I was interested in you know, different ways to teach. You know, you have classic school and you have alternatives like Montessori, or you know, other alternatives to schooling, like small groups, or inverse teaching, where it's the students that tries to do the teacher's job by explaining the class, and by, you know, so maybe that's why I wanted to speak about this, and maybe doing like you know, a conversation. Not only you talk about your ideas and we talk about your ideas, but more like you try to teach us ideas and we try to implement them. But of course, we are not going to make this huge, you know, story world, big RPG, big game, because we don't have the capacities, neither the money. But maybe we could do like I think it's, I don't know who said it, but a small situation like a phone booth or something. Because what you want to do is interaction between people. Maybe start with a small situation, a closed space, and you say you have to make an interesting conversation between two persons in one apartment. Or maybe what we try to do with George is we are on a boat and there are a father, a son, the girlfriend of the son, and a friend of the son. And then some stuff happens, and because you're on a boat, you can't escape the boat. You have to confront the situations. Confront, you know, your friend is sick, so he's vomiting all the time and he's endangered because he's dehydrated. What do? Do you help him? Do you comfort him, or are you violent with him because you say, what are you doing? Why are you on this boat? You knew we were going to do this long trip of 3 weeks, and you didn't tell us you were sick. You know, you bastard. And but it could be like we joked a lot with George, imagining situations, and I think this is really funny because like he said, like maybe the girl, your girlfriend is cheating on you with your dad, or you know, like a Shakespearean, you know, treason, or your friend is not your friend, he's here to kill you, and he has a
I
lot
think
of
this is
anger
getting a
against
little
you.
too complicated
You
for
know,
us exercise.
I mean, this is just imagination, but I mean, what I wanted to say is, you know, a closed situation, maybe 2, 3 characters max, and small interaction, and the interaction would be with games, like mini games, like for example, you know, everybody has to sleep on 8 hours or 4 hours on a boat. The boat can't be like everyone is sleeping, so for example, your father is holding the boat and he's driving the boat, and everybody else is sleeping. And when it's your turn, you have to make a coffee for him. But it's not just you pick the option, make a coffee, you have to make the coffee, and it's hard because the boat is moving. So if you fail because you failed the mini game, or you know, the action of making coffee and not trying to, you know, to drop it on the floor. And this way to tell stories through a bit of gameplay, and not only like you pick a line of dialogue. Option A, you give a coffee to your father. Option B, you don't give a coffee. You know, you try to make a coffee.
Okay, I'm going to cut you off here because you guys have given me a great deal to think about. We're out of time. But
I have one proposal that might help wrap this up a bit.
Okay.
Maybe to simplify things, maybe something like a show and tell structure might be a good idea. Instead of assigning homework where you as the teacher say, here's a challenge, go do this. I imagine that most of us are taking away what we find most interesting from the content of the course. And there are probably different aspects that we are interested in. So maybe having it just be as loose as everyone go make something, rather it be a phone booth interaction, or rather it be talking more just on concrete terms, something in code that actually executes in code, or something that you write out on paper, that you write out in pseudocode on paper if you're not a coder, or maybe like a way that takes Chris's ideas and writes that out in pseudocode in some way, or maybe something else entirely, and bring that as a show and tell, as I have this idea thing that you can give feedback to us on. And that way it solves, I think, what a lot of us could benefit from, of having that back and forth interaction, of challenging these ideas in a way that puts these ideas to a context that helps it, that it's closer to what each of us individually finds interesting about the material.
The only thing I would very quick to that is making sure that if that is the option, having still limited constraints on it, so that things don't end up, so the time that we do get on the course is just kind of focused towards something that is deliverable almost, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. Like, don't try to make Final Fantasy or something.
Yeah, my preference would be for something that would have much more concrete things. Like, I came here having no idea if I will hate every idea or agree with you at all, Chris. But I would like to learn how to approach this as a tool. So for me, having stuff that's concrete from the beginning, like even if it's go write a scene on paper with two people talking as the first class's homework, and then developing on top of that with each step. And so at the end of the 14 or 15 weeks, I can be like, all right, cool. I started with trying to describe two people talking. And by the end, I've got the verbs, I've got a thing in Sappho, and I, whether or not I agree, I have done the process of taking some little short scene and using it. So I now understand the basics of interactive storytelling and can now go be my own Don Quixote and go charge things.
Yes, that's the goal.
Yeah, so that's, and I think homework so that I have time to think about it and bringing it back and talking about it like some people have suggested. I think all of that sounds good, but I think walk me through getting one little thing all the way done from end to end would be my biggest desire.
Yeah.
Okay. My primary. Oh, okay. Go ahead.
One last thing. You could follow, like, I saw a masterclass of a filmmaker. So it's different thing, but you have assignments each week. First assignment would be like watch movies, watch classic movies. Second assignment would be like read one precise book and take inspiration from it. The third assignment would be like film a conversation, or film someone chasing someone else, and more it would be more like make a movie, but step by step, So we already have, like, maybe you could, I don't know, you already advise us to read some stuff, to watch some videos you made. Maybe you could recommend to play some games. You already recommend us to play your games, but maybe games made by other people. And maybe you could say, like, first assignment is try to, like you said, try to solve this problem, or try to make a fun algorithm, or try to make a good, small steps, but practical steps.
Okay. The primary thing I have learned from this discussion, it's been very illuminating for me. Primary lesson I have learned is something that I frequently look in the mirror and say to myself, which is, "You sniveling fool!" Because I have really missed a great opportunity here. I should have started with this long ago when we first started with personality models. I should have said, okay, guys, here's a scenario. I should have, in fact, I already have a good idea of how to do this. We're going to have this basic scenario, something you see in the movies all the time. And here are the basic characters. All right, let's create a personality model. And then the next week we start talking about what are some of the verbs that we might have in this. And then we start talking about how do we calculate reactions of people to, let's start off with one event. How do we calculate reactions of people? Stuff like that. so I'm going to put a lot of thought into how to catch up on this, and we will start into that process. We will build a micro story world. Let me just ask you this. How many of you have seen at least half a dozen conventional American cowboy Western movies or TV shows? Or is there anybody who hasn't seen at least half a dozen of these things?
Is it the tropes almost, or the
Yeah,
kind of,
do you know the tropes of these?
Yes.
Okay, because
Says the American.
Yeah, I'm thinking about building something around the classic barroom brawl, where the guys get into. In fact, I'm going to right now. There is a YouTube video that I would
Western
like.
is the exact term, actually, Lorenzo.
Let's see.
Lorenzo, did you say that you're in France?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought you said that, and then I became convinced when your example was that your girlfriend is having an affair with your father. And I went, that's got to be France. Only there are not many things you can't get in America. That's one of them.
Okay. I have a
Why are you
YouTube
laughing? I'm
video
serious.
for everyone to watch. This isn't so much homework as entertainment, because this plays so well with the standard tropes of the barroom brawl. So anyway, enjoy that. And I'm going to put something together. I will send out an email to each of you explaining the idea, and next week we will have, you will better be prepared to play a far more active role than you have in the past. And I also want to apologize for not seeing this previously. It's, you sniveling fool, you should have seen this. So
Chris, there's been so much stuff to keep on top of so far in this, like for me at least, for learning new stuff. Don't worry about it. I need it every second just to hold on for me.
okay.
So this is a good time to start. And if you want it to take longer, like I will be happy to give you, for me at least, I'll be happy to give you another $50 to go for another quarter. So if you want to extend this, I'd be game for that, but you don't have to by any stretch.
We'll play it by ear.
Okay, cool. All right.
Okay,
I'm
guys.
excited.
I will send you an email in a few days, and I'll see you next week.
Brilliant.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Awesome. See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.